This Week in Startups is brought to you by UserTesting. Real-time video feedback, real fast, from wherever you work. UserTesting. Real human insights. Try UserTesting free today at usertesting.com/twist.
LinkedIn Jobs. A business is only as strong as its people, and every hire matters. Go to linkedin.com/twist to post your first job for free. That's linkedin.com/twist. Terms and conditions apply.
And OurCrowd helps you invest early in pre-IPO companies alongside professional VCs. If you're interested in investing, you can join OurCrowd for free at OurCrowd.com/twist.
Welcome to This Week in Startups. We have an amazing show for you today. We have the CEO of the Oura Ring. If you don't know the Oura Ring, they're selling hundreds of thousands of these products. It's making millions and millions of dollars. And the Oura Ring tracks your sleep and your readiness, kind of like a Fitbit, but probably a little more dope. It's an independent company, and we have the CEO on the show today. But before we get to that, I thought I would check in with the insanity coming out of Facebook yet again. Here we go again. If you don't know, attorney generals from 44 states have urged Facebook not to launch a kids-only, which means 13 years old and under, version of Instagram. And in a letter sent to Mark Zuckerberg on May 10th, attorneys from these 44 states urged the Facebook CEO to abandon plans to launch a version of Instagram for kids under 13. The letter was submitted by the National Association of Attorneys Generals after BuzzFeed News first reported in March that Facebook was planning to launch Instagram for kids. In the letter, pretty straightforward, Facebook has historically failed to protect the welfare of children on its platforms, I would argue, and adults. We'll get into that. The attorneys general have an interest in protecting our youngest citizens, and Facebook's plans to create a platform where kids under the age of 13 are encouraged to share content online is contrary to that interest. It appears that Facebook is not responding to a need, but instead creating one, as this platform appeals primarily to children who otherwise do not or would not have an Instagram account. Facebook's response: a Facebook spokesperson said the company has just started exploring a version of Instagram for kids and said the company is committing today not to show ads in the product. Quote, "We agree that any experience we develop must prioritize their safety and privacy, and we will consult with experts in child development, child safety, and mental health, and privacy advocates to inform it," the spokesperson said. "We also look forward to working with legislatures and regulators, including the nation's attorneys general." Google actually owns a service, YouTube for Kids, and there are ways for children to lie about their age and access the main site. I actually use the YouTube for Kids in our household. It is incredibly well groomed. I haven't seen anything even close to being crazy. It's a whitelisted app. Yet in 2019, YouTube reached a $170 million settlement with the FTC and New York Attorney General over claims it illegally earned money from collecting the personal information of kids without parental consent, allegedly violating COPA. If you don't know COPA, that's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Following the settlement, YouTube said in a blog post that it will limit data collection on videos aimed at children, regardless of the age of the user, which makes total sense. And, the situation here is, do you trust Instagram and Facebook? The answer to that is no. You should not trust this company. They have been caught with their hand in the cookie jar over and over and over again. So it's a company you simply cannot trust. And there's a long list of fines that they've gotten that are absolutely horrendous. Cambridge Analytica, another scandal. The list goes on and on. Their groups product, which outed gay people who were added to groups without their permission. Facebook has the worst track record of protecting privacy and, in general, thinking about their users. And this will become an app for grooming children. You know that child predators will get on the app. It is a recipe for disaster. And children should not be on social media. In fact, anybody who uses any form of social media will tell you that it is a negative more than a positive in many instances in their lives, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, etc. These are really gnarly places that can cause anxiety, feelings of inadequacy, And I would say we'll look at this historically in 10 or 20 years, like the Juul. This is the Juul releasing pineapple, pina colada, blueberry cheesecake, whatever flavors those horrible individuals launch targeted at children. This is the exact same thing, arguably worse, because kids, I guarantee you, will be targeted on this platform and attacked, and I guarantee you they will commit suicide. I know it sounds like I'm being hysterical, but the statistics are the statistics. Adults and teens are killing themselves, are committing acts of self-harm, are becoming just tragically obsessed with their bodies to the point of eating disorders. You as a parent need only look at your own usage of social media and the detrimental impact it's had on your life, on our society, on our public discourse, to know that subjecting your children and our children to social media at a young age is insane and it's abuse. Now, I know, again, you're going to say this is hysterical, but for somebody to do this, like Zuckerberg, it is only in his self-interest. He's thinking, how do I prepare these users for a lifetime on social media? And we, as parents, should be thinking, how do we prepare our children for a life off of social media? This grand experiment has gone horribly wrong. Facebook cannot even control the policing of Nazism, white supremacy, Holocaust deniers on their platform. Why on earth would we trust them with our children's attention? The attorneys general in this case are 100% right. Don't trust Zuck. A retired FBI assistant director and NBC national security contributor, Frank Figliazzi, I think I got it right. He said Instagram for kids. We can't even keep extremism off social media for adults. Why don't we just open a Las Vegas casino for children and call it a day? He's not wrong. And the Massachusetts Attorney General, Maura Healey, Facebook has repeatedly failed to protect the health and well-being of children on its platform. Instagram for kids is a shameful attempt to exploit and profit off vulnerable people. I'm leading a letter to Mark Zuckerberg with 44 AGs to demand they abandon this plan. Marianne Williamson, you may remember as the crystal lady from the Democratic debates. I mean, absolutely my favorite. I am a huge Marianne Williamson fan. This would be up there with one of the worst ideas in the world. She is not wrong. Facebook had its Messenger Kids since December 2027. Parents set up the accounts and have a suite of controls. They claim they don't collect data, no search visibility. And why would you trust Facebook? In 2019, the FTC imposed a $5 billion penalty and sweeping new privacy restrictions on Facebook, the largest fine for privacy ever. That alone, of all the things we've discussed, should negate them from being able to do this, let alone common sense. In 2017, the European Commission fined Facebook $110 million for providing incorrect or misleading information during the Commission's 2014 investigation under the EU merger regulation of Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp. In 2016, Cambridge Analytica scandal resulted in another huge fine. And in 2009, they got fined $9.5 million for its Beacon ad program. And I think there was doubled to 20, and they were under a 20-year audit. I'm searching for the most charitable take here, and I can't find it. To claim that kids are signing up and therefore we should make for Facebook anyway and make this, that is not a logical statement. That's like saying some kids got, paid some adult to buy them beer or cigarettes and therefore we should let them smoke cigarettes. Sorry, wrong. The least charitable take, the science is clear. Social media has a detrimental impact on people's mental health. Certainly that affects children and teens massively. I am not letting my daughters onto social media anytime, maybe when they're 16, I think, might be a reasonable time, 17. But I don't care if I'm the last parent to allow my kids onto this. Zuckerberg, you're a disgrace. You should be ashamed of yourself. And you need to go meditate in the woods and take a deep, deep look at yourself. You have behaved horribly in your running of Facebook, and this is amongst the worst ideas I've ever heard in the technology industry. And it's an even horrible idea for you, Zuck. That's how bad it is. Okay, stick with us. Are you launching a new product, developing a new prototype? Maybe you're rolling out a new campaign? UserTesting lets you see, hear, and talk to your customers to understand how they experience your brand, products, and services. Put yourself in the customer's shoes with real-time video feedback. The UserTesting Human Insight platform allows you to target your exact audience, ask them any question, or give them a task to perform. How interesting is that? It's a tech platform that connects brands with their target audiences in order to get feedback on any experience. Testers can get paid $10 for their time. These users aren't doing this to get rich. No, they're doing it because they really want to help make your products and services better. So watch, listen, and observe their reactions so that you can connect the dots and keep improving your product and service. You'll get feedback within hours and strengthen the relationship with your coveted customers. UserTesting is used by startups and the world's most innovative brands, from AllTrails, Grammarly, to Microsoft and Capital One. Here's a testimonial. Chubbies is a men's casual apparel brand that gained valuable insights by asking some of their customers to explain why they love Chubby shorts. They also asked for new product suggestions to guide their product roadmap. Think about how brilliant that is. It builds fiber between you and your customers because they feel heard, and we all want to be heard in this life. Experience what your customer experiences by using UserTesting. Request your free trial at usertesting.com/twist. usertesting.com/twist. And get the fast human decisions you need to make more informed business decisions at scale. Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. My guest today makes this ring I'm wearing. No, we are not changing the name of the show to This Week in Jewelry. This is the fabulous Oura ring that I am holding in my hand. Just a miracle of hardware and sensors. It's incredibly light. It's incredibly cheap, or I shouldn't say cheap, affordable in price. It's well constructed, and it is something that basically disappears when you wear it. So why would one wear a smart ring? Well, the ring lets you know how your body is doing, and instead of just giving you what my Fitbit or your Apple Watch might get you, the software is designed to give you an idea of your readiness and your restfulness and how prepared you are to take on the world. I started using these years ago. The first version, I'll be totally honest, was pretty bad. The latest version that somebody, one of the advertisers who was recently bought ads on the program, sent me it as a Christmas gift. And I said, wow, I forgot about Oura. And I put it on and I've had an amazing experience. It is a fan-frickin-tastic product. And the CEO of Oura is with us today. His name is Harpreet Rai. Did I get it right, Harpreet?
You got it right. You got it right.
Thank God. You know,
almost as tough as your last name.
Exactly. Now you know what I go through. So you heard my little preamble. You weren't at the company when the product was very 1.0. And in fact, it launched at the TechCrunch 50 event, which I co-founded back in the day when Mike Arrington and I were on speaking terms and friends, actually. not for very long. In fact, he was a guy who started TechCrunch. But you joined as the president of the company 4 years ago in May of 2017, became the CEO in July of 2018. How did you come to become the CEO and president, then CEO of Oura? And then tell me, how is the company doing today?
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for having me on the show, Jason, and excited to be here. And obviously appreciate the kind words on the product. It definitely takes a village to as they say.
Yeah. Hardware is hard.
Hardware is hard for sure.
Oh God, is it ever?
No, look, I got to the company in probably, on paper, maybe not a straightforward way, but at least in my head, it still all makes sense. So I did study hardware in college. I went to University of Michigan, studied electrical engineering, and specifically studied MEMS. And so, I was in school graduating around 2006.
What are MEMS for the audience who don't know?
Yeah, MEMS is microelectronic mechanical systems. I like to think about it as basically sensor design. Most sensors today are made using, principles of MEMS technology.
Miniature machines, I think, is how it used to be explained. But now people use the word sensors.
Yes. Yeah. So, my senior design project was an accelerometer or, something that tracks motion that I think got more popular first than the Nintendo Wii before Fitbit and step trackers. And my master's
famously
design,
with the tennis, right? The Wii
That's
tennis,
right.
you would swing the arm, and everybody was wondering, how does it know? Is it doing it through the camera? And it was like, no, inside there is some mechanism, some machine that tracks it. An accelerometer, is it like oil in a tube or something back then? What was actually doing it?
So, I mean, yeah, I think how you fabricate a sensor like that, right? You have different level layers in silicon, and you can make certain parts of the layer almost like, think of Tetris. And so if you had like 2 blocks with 1 block going across, and all of a sudden this 1 block is really thin like a piece of paper, if you move it, that paper is going to bend. And turns out when that paper bends, there's actually an electrical signal it outputs. And that actually is sort of the basis of an accelerometer. And there are many directions in how you actually layer these things in a semiconductor lab is, I think a lot of fun. It's like tiny Legos. And so that's what I studied in college, believe it or not. Yeah.
And you then went to work where to put this degree to work? Or was it?
Yeah.
Was Oura the first job?
No. Well, I had a lot of student debt. Michigan is actually expensive out of state, and I actually decided, to go. I grew up in New Jersey. I think we were talking about it a bit before. And so for me, I wanted to be, in the city, right? All the cool kids are in the city.
Oh, yeah. You got to get over that bridge or tunnel.
Exactly. My sister was in the city, older sister, so I had to be there. And so, I think for me, luckily, it was the finance boom. And, investment banks were basically hiring, all types of people. And so I got a job in banking, investment banking, 1 year, my first year out of college and at Morgan Stanley in the M&A group. My first year, I got totally worked, a lot like what you still hear the stories of, probably averaged over 100 hours a week. And
would they pay you for that kind of sacrifice? Like I heard people are getting now at Goldman $250K out of school.
So first year out of school back then, it was like a $60K base. And if you were top of your class, it was $60K bonus. So like 120. Now you got to remember
120 for working 80 hours a week. Yep. So you essentially got paid $60,000 twice.
yeah, right. Yeah. Or like $30 an hour or something like that if you run the math out. So I did that out of school. And frankly, my first year gained 50 pounds, about a pound a week. Started losing some hair, at the age of 21, 22. Now I wear a turban, so not that bad. You can't see it. And frankly, I remember my friends coming to see me, that I went to college with, and they're like, man, your skin is like looking like it's getting gray. Like, you're just inside all the time.
You're starting to look like a zombie. It is true. They lock you in a building and you're ordering up food and you're sitting at a desk, working on a spreadsheet, building models, doing decks, and it's a horrible life, but you learn a ton, right? Did you learn a ton?
I did. I mean, look, in the M&A group especially, you get to work on, live transactions, multi-billion-dollar deals, big company buying XYZ companies. So it's definitely a seat, at the table to learn. And, but it was the first time ever in my life that I'd get home from work. And it was my first time, full-time work, did a bunch of internships and a lot actually in hardware as well. And stuff like that in college. But it was my first time getting home and not being able to fall asleep. It'd be like 2, 3 a.m. I'm coming home from work. You'd think you'd be exhausted and I couldn't fall asleep. And so I started developing like mild insomnia. That's probably like where my interest with sleep started. My interest with health started way earlier, mainly out of just personal curiosity. I was a bad athlete growing up, wanted to fit in, went to big public high school. Sports was a way to fit in, back then. And being smart wasn't necessarily cool. And, so for me, I was just a bad athlete. And I remember being so frustrated as a teenager, being like, well, I tried this, I trained this way, I eat what these kids are eating, but I work twice as hard to be half as good. And so I always thought, my dad was a double E, my grandfather was a double E. So I was like, oh, these sensors, you can take these sensors and learn about the human body and understand why I'm different. And then I can figure out what to do for me. So that's what I sort of, thought. And then I got distracted a bit with some student debt and, went into banking. And then, after my first year, I left, basically the week I got my bonus, like a lot of first year bankers do that sign up for, a 2-year program. And I went to a hedge fund. So I went to a $7 billion hedge fund called Eminence Capital. They've been around, for 23 years now, still going strong, awesome team. And luckily, I just got to learn there and much more manageable lifestyle. Luckily, so we were encouraged to work out, eat healthy,
really?
Get sleep.
Wow.
Yeah. No, we had a gym in the office, everyone.
Did you see the whole Goldman, getting so many complaints from Gen Z and millennials joining the program that they're like, okay, you guys can take a day off a week. You can have Sundays off. And they were like, no, we actually want weekends off. So I guess they're just going to have to roll with the punches, right? If this next generation does not want to suffer and advance quickly, they can advance at a more reasonable place and have a slightly less compensation and just double the number of people, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. What's your take on that when you saw it?
Man, I feel like the industry's been going through that for a bit. I do think they're doing things as banks to try to make it more tolerable. Like, before even the idea of mandatory day off back in 2006, 2007, that wasn't going to happen. So at least one, they're getting in the right direction. Hopefully they can get there and be like, hey, if you work 24 hours straight, like we make sure you don't do that 2 nights in a row, right? I think that's when some like.
But I mean, when you were working 24 hours straight, what were the last 4 to 8 hours like in terms of productivity?
Man, it's sort of hard, honestly, to assess it because you're so out of it.
Exactly.
Like,
it's diminishing returns. Yeah. I mean, listen, I like to work hard, but I find if I don't get my 6 to 7 hours of good sleep, my performance is just not crisp, And I think that's where the Oura is just such a magical product in that you're not just telling people like their skin temperature or heartbeat. I think you have all that stuff included, yes?
Yeah.
But you start with this concept of readiness. So when you open the app, it's like, here's your sleep score. And, in the 80s is really good. Yeah. And then here's readiness. What is readiness?
Well, you said it. You kicked it off right. Readiness is your ability to take on the day. And it's not just ready physically for the gym. It might be ready for, frankly, doing a really, you have to host people a lot, right? You've been doing this for a decade, right? You got to be sharp on your feet. You got to be creative, right? If you're a PM in a software app, like you're probably thinking about, oh, wait, should I dice the data this way and actually recut this? And now I'm realizing the UX flow is wrong, right? So I think, and if you're a financial analyst crushing spreadsheets, like, hey, there's lots of mistakes you make. There's hundreds, thousands of columns and rows, right? And so I think, ready is exactly that. That's the purpose, the idea behind readiness. Now, how we calculate it, we look at not just one day of data, one night of bad sleep. You can sort of suffer through that and be okay the next day. We look at a 2-week average of sleep, 2-week average of activity, the prior night of sleep, the prior day of activity. And then we look at a couple physiological signals and how they change from your baseline. What was your heart rate? Your lowest resting heart rate relative to your norm. What was your change in heart rate variability versus your average? What was your change in temperature and respiratory rate? And we use those, call it 8 things, and we come up with this overall readiness score. And that's something we patented, something we found a lot of customer resonance in, because just looking at one night's sleep, it's like, oh, what do you take? But then when you have 3 bad nights of banking, right? Like that, hey, you're going to go on that third all night in a row? All right. And no, readiness score would probably show like you're, failing that test pretty bad.
Growing your business takes more than offering a popular product or service. That's important, but it takes more than that. It's essential to have the right people in place to ensure your company operates smoothly and has the potential to grow and expand, or, as we say in our industry, scale. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right candidates for free. Hiring is a major part of my strategy at launch right now. We just hired a second producer, Justin, doing a great job. A curriculum designer, Cuddy, I call him Cuts. I always give people a good nickname. He likes that one. And I got to get some more researchers in here. You guys know what's happening in my world. Things are blowing up. You know where I find these great candidates? I find them on LinkedIn Jobs, of course. And you can get started by posting your job for free to reach LinkedIn's network of over 740 million professionals. And really, LinkedIn's got that global reach. You can fill out targeted screening questions to get your role in front of the most qualified candidates with the experience, skills, and motivation you need. Then, with simple filtering and management tools that are all built into LinkedIn, you can easily review, rate, and hone in on your top candidates. All of those amazing filtering tools are just built in. When your business is ready to make that next game-changing hire, you're going to find the right person on LinkedIn Jobs. And now, can post your job for free. That's right. LinkedIn loves This Week in Startups. They always give us a great deal for you. Visit linkedin.com/twist. Again, linkedin.com/TWIST, and you can post your first job for free. No strings attached. They know you're going to love it. Once you get that first hire and you see how easy peasy lemon squeezy it is, you're going to go for a second and third. Terms and conditions apply because they're giving you something for free. This was one of the things that was a little confounding for me and disappointing when I first started using the Ring, because I don't read the manual, nor do I read any of the tooltips. I just want to turn it on and see everything. But it took me a minute to be like, oh, they're going to give me a score later on. How do you know that readiness equals performance? Have you done studies? Do you have anything inside the company where you work with universities or do actual laboratory experiments to know that readiness is like actually a valid, number?
Yeah.
And how do you do that? I guess
so
is a big question.
Yeah. And at some point we'll connect the rest of the dots and how it got to the company, but I think you're starting to see it already. Readiness, a couple things. One, you look at the theory, right? So there's lots and lots of good science papers in theory saying, hey, your HRV changes or your resting heart rate changes, or if you get 6 hours of sleep,
So resting heart rate is when I'm asleep.
Correct. We look at it when you're sleeping.
Got it.
And your lowest resting heart rate. And then we look at that.
Why is lowest resting heart rate so important?
Physiologically, and also a little bit with the autonomic nervous system, the vagus nerve that connects your brain and your body. Your lowest resting heart rate is something that requires both physical and mental relaxation. So you typically reach the research shows that if you're actually well recovered and well rested in sort of a, normal pattern, you'll reach your lowest resting heart rate sort of midway through the night, right? Now, if you're super stressed, you're working super late, or you worked out late, or you drank, or you ate a ton of food, your resting heart rate will actually happen much later. It'll take you 7, 8 hours to process that alcohol or that stress. So
digestion, alcohol, getting in a fight with your spouse, your boss yells at you, or you got a big project tomorrow, that could actually keep you away from the lowest resting heart rate.
Correct. Yeah, it's just a sign of stress. And then same with heart rate variability, right? I think heart rate variability is a great measure of the autonomic nervous system. That's sort of showing this, stress on your central nervous system, on your body and your brain. And so I think those two are really important to look at. And then sleep, we do think that it's not just one night of bad sleep. It's that compounding nights of bad sleep that really hits you. And then also, if you've been inactive, if you're less active than normal or even more active, right, you're going to be tired. Like, hey, you just ran a marathon.
I've done that. Yeah, dude, it's just 3 or 4 days of your body feels like you got hit by a Mack truck. So the heart rate variability, that's something we've just been able to start capturing on these devices, whether it's an Apple Watch, Fitbit, or Oura.
Correct.
This is a new sensor, or the sensors have become precise enough to pick this up?
The latter, yeah. So heart rate variability is actually the variation in every single heartbeat. So you and I are sitting...
The time between them is how it's explained to me. Is that what it is?
Correct. Yeah. The interbeat interval is think about it sort of, your heartbeat over time is, look like a sinusoidal wave pattern, right? And so, time is sort of on your x-axis, right? If you think about that, the space between each beat, if we're sitting here taping this podcast and our 60 beats per minute, that's the average over the minute. Now, the question is, what's the variability within that minute, right? And that is heart rate variability.
Less variability and more consistency is better?
Opposite. It's counterintuitive. Yeah. So actually, you want more variability.
What? That's so counterintuitive. Why would more be better? Or do we not know?
I think theoretically, maybe I can explain it physiologically speaking. So when you're in a high variation, a high heart rate variability, you can sort of adapt to any situation. So part of your body's functions is like, imagine like we're sitting here and all of a sudden like, a cheetah jumps in the room. Right. What do you need to do, right? Fight or flight. You need to drop everything, you need to push, Nick to the ground, and you need to make, haul for it, right? So to get Nick, right, unfortunately, right? But for you to respond that way, you need to be in a little bit of a flow state. You need to have that variation. So that high variability, right, allows you to react and adjust quickly from both your mind and your body and not freeze. Now, if you are, if you're really sort of anxious and stressed. It's like every little thing irks you, right? And that like you feel like rigid, you feel like stuck. Your heart rate is actually very, very, that interbeat interval is very consistent.
Beep, 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 beep. Whereas like heart rate variability, when it's different, it makes you more nimble. You got better cardiovascular ability, maybe more resiliency because you're dealing with many different situations, kind of like cross training, where a lot of different fitness theories are. You don't want to just do 4 exercises. You want to try 400 different exercises and get all different types of movement going on your body.
Precisely. I think the best thing I heard on that. Do you know what the best exercise in the world is? Have you heard this one?
Walking? No.
No, it's the one you're not doing. Right.
Oh, what a great one.
Yeah. So you want that ability to adapt, but no.
It's interesting. There is a whole philosophy of working out, which is for guys who get older, or anybody who gets older, I suppose. But I was listening to it maybe it was on Tim Ferriss or something, that they try to get older men to try new exercises, crawling on the ground, moving, balance beams, just anything different, so that your mind and your body gets just better at adapting. And when you don't, you get this negative cycle of totally being at your desk all the time. But at some point, the sensors were able to pick up heart rate variability. And is that how we know when heart attacks occur now, or something is happening? Is it the heart rate variability, the one that gives some sort of indication something's wrong?
There's a lot of things that go into that. I would say early research has been showing that basically lowered heart rate variability, you're right, is a very good indicator of a heart attack or cardiac event. Now, specifically, there's lots of different cardiac events, and turns out, like you were sort of getting, why can we see heart rate variability now? That's a really good question. It's really the granularity of these sensors, and I can talk about sort of why it's a ring and why, how we focused on that, because there's a lot of key details in there that are pretty technical, but would be love to dive into. I think you can train these data sets on anything. So if you can actually get that raw pulse waveform, you can start comparing that raw pulse waveform to an EKG, and then start looking at EKGs of, hey, what do people that have AFib look like? Well, what do people who look like, some congestive heart failure look like before that event? And you can start to train, and, we even showed this with COVID. What do people who look like they're getting, who've gotten sick look like? What are all their, what is that pulse waveform data and your temperature data and all the things we derive from our respiratory rate, heart rate variability look like for this subset of people? And you can train these data sets. You can train these models against, reference data.
And sleep became a driving force for you raising money, I understand, in the last round, or just the product evolving. I saw that also with our investment in Calm.
Yeah.
When they went, they owned meditation, but they also then started to own the sleep portion of that. Tell me about, the impact sleep has had, and also the anxiety produced during the pandemic. And for many people, not all, obviously, some people were thrilled. But Trump's presidency here in the United States caused a lot of anxiety, caused a lot of insomnia, and so did the pandemic. So I'm curious, during your tenure, did you see those things manifest in the aggregate data of Oura's data set? You must be able to have seen when the pandemic and the shutdowns occurred, many sleepless nights. Tell us about what you saw in the aggregate data. Obviously, you're not looking at individuals.
Totally, yeah. So being able to see, de-identified data, no one's name attached to it, but across the whole database.
Sure.
Very interesting things. I think counterintuitively, when the pandemic started, for sure, but we actually published this on our blog, The Pulse, where we actually showed that as the pandemic went on, after a couple months, people were actually getting more consistent patterns, right? So they're actually sleeping better for most people. Now, some people obviously were not. Now,
wait a second. Yeah, I think through that theory. Why would people be sleeping better in a pandemic? I think
less variation. You're not going out.
You're not going to work. You're not going to dinner. You're not going out drinking and partying and going to the movies or something like that. You're leading a more sedentary, isolated lifestyle.
Yeah, consistent, right?
Consistency. So more sleep, perhaps even more sleep. I was doom scrolling till 4 a.m. God, I look back at my pandemic was a complete mania. Now that
we definitely saw that with a subset of
I'm in that subset of does not go to sleep, keep scrolling Twitter and looking at COVID stats.
Now we're
trying to figure it out.
we should look at it again. And in the election, I want to get back to because we actually showed their collective loss of sleep to the U.S. On that. But on what's happening now, we actually haven't gone through it lately. We should probably do it as it's now dragged on for over a year. I bet probably most are probably like you now. You were describing yourself early on. Like as this is dragged on, people are getting pent up. People want to get out. And so I think, after this much isolation, I wouldn't be surprised if people's data has changed. But it's a good something good and topical to do now. What we did see during the election, we actually published this on our blog too, and we showed that I think the average American got 45 minutes of less sleep that night. So you start to multiply out 300 million people.
People are not going to be, people are not going to be, when people say it's not going to be a productive day at the office, they're right.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, look, I think we saw fascinating data and getting back to sleep, really this idea of readiness. I think, when Oura was launched at the launch festival, right? No wearables were really doing sleep, right? Fitbit hadn't launched sleep. Apple now does time in bed, but they don't really do sleep. They don't do sleep stages. They don't do even heart rate variability consistently throughout the day or night. But, at the time, no one was really doing sleep. So it was just steps and just active heart rate was sort of the thing. Like how high can you get your heart rate or, when you're running, just like chest straps. And I think for us, the approach was like, hey, sleep's this whole other area of your life. And by the way, 99.9% of people, even the investment bankers, will try to sleep tonight. But only 10% of the US is actually going to work out today. And maybe 15 to 20% will work out this week. Now 40% pay for gym memberships, or pre-COVID we're paying. But sleep is a consistent thing you do. It has an immediate impact on how you perform and feel physically, mentally, emotionally the next day. And frankly, if you look at it as a country or as a society globally, we're getting less sleep, probably over the last. Why are we
getting less sleep? Is it just it's the devices? It's got to be people taking their iPhones and doom scrolling and playing that last game of threes or listening to that last podcast.
Or, Netflix, right? Netflix used to say their biggest enemy was sleep, right?
Yeah, you're right. You know what, man? Binge watching is killing people. Yeah. I mean, it's literally, people will start thinking about binge watching like they do social media. Like it's almost like the new cigarettes. You must get sleep to be ready for the next day.
It's worse than cigarettes. Lack of sleep has been shown to early onset of Alzheimer's in particular. Great research out there showing less deep sleep is leading to the early onset of Alzheimer's. If you get 4 hours of sleep, basically your glycemic response, your insulin levels are going to be nearly, 50% as worse.
So you get fat.
You get fat. So actually the hormone.
That's what was happening to you when you became a fat
investment banker.
Banker. It was because of lack of sleep.
Yeah.
And there's no way to diet or exercise out of that if if your body is physiologically just not processing food
the
properly.
Hunger thing and insulin response. So I'm actually more interested on I thought this was fascinating. So you have two hormones really that control your hunger and then how full you are. So ghrelin, determines sort of how hungry you feel. Leptin is determining actually how full you feel after. So if you get 4 hours versus 8 hours of sleep, your ghrelin levels double and your leptin levels go down by half. So you're going to crave twice as much food and you're going to feel half as full, right? So your body's training you. It's like, why would you? We're the only species on Earth. Matt Walker says it's such a good point. Only species on Earth that deprives themselves of sleep. And so your body is like, hey, you're trying to kill me, or something's trying to hunt me. I'm like, so I need to eat a lot of food, right? Like you're going through this fight or flight response.
Ah, that's fascinating. Yeah, if you're not sleeping, it's like get more food in the system because it's probably evolutionarily that you're being chased by a tiger or a pack, or another village that wants to kill your village or something.
It was that cheetah. He's still chasing us. That was in the room earlier.
It's time for OurCrowd's Deal of the Week. Right now, you can join OurCrowd's investment in Launchpad. Launchpad, according to the deal memo, does AI-powered autonomous manufacturing incorporating 3D printing to efficiently combine multiple materials into complex products. It's revolutionary. Launchpad is backed by Idealab, the startup incubator co-founded by famed VC Bill Gross, which has launched over 150 companies ranging from robotics to clean tech. You can get in early on Launchpad and other unique opportunities at ourcrowd.com/twist. I recently wet my beak and placed a small bet on Cyabra, a company that uses AI to uncover disinformation and expose fake news on social media. Speaking of wetting your beak, did you know OurCrowd investors were able to get in on some of the best IPOs of 2019 and 2020? They benefited from companies IPOing like Beyond Meat and Lemonade, and some of OurCrowd's companies have been acquired by buyers like Intel, Nike, Microsoft, Oracle, and Uber. With OurCrowd, accredited investors can invest directly and easily in startups early before they IPO or get bought. The investment professionals at OurCrowd have already invested hundreds of millions of dollars in over 200 companies with dozens of exits. Again, the OurCrowd account is free. Just go to OurCrowd.com/twist. Okay, let's get back to this amazing episode. Let's talk about the business of this. Hardware businesses fail at a rate at least 2 or 3 times software businesses, because you're not only in the hardware business, you're also in the software business. And you're not only in the software and the hardware business, you also become in the retail/distribution business. So you really have to take on three businesses concurrently: a software business and a hardware business, and somehow getting them to people. Yeah. The product is mainly sold direct to consumer. Am I correct in that?
Direct to consumer online. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that the only way to buy it, or can you buy it in stores?
No, we haven't done any retail stores. We haven't done any wholesalers or anything like that. We've even not even Amazon. We've kept it on OuraRing.com.
Wow. And explain to people how you do the ring sizing, because this is a particularly delightful process. I thought it would be, arduous. It turns out it's delightful.
Yeah, look, I think just like Warby Parker, if you want to try on glasses, right? Like you get a couple sent to your house. So what we do is, if you don't know your ring size, which most people don't, I didn't know mine either. Yep. We send a sizing kit in the mail when you order a ring, and then you get to pick out which size you are. You get plastic set of sizes 6 through 13. Figure out what size you are, and then you confirm the size, and you get a product that what we hear from customers is like, hey, this feels like it's just for me. It's not like I have to take links out of the watch strap.
10 sizes or so?
8, 6 to 13.
Sizes. It's really just in terms of aesthetics. You get a little box for people who haven't ordered one before. And it just has, whatever, the 8 plastic ones. You try it on, and whichever one you want, you go back online, say, I'm a size 10 or whatever it is, and you get it. And then I guess you have to throw that away. It feels a little bit wasteful, but I mean,
or give it to a friend. That's
you can give it to a friend for when they do it. That's a smart idea.
Yeah.
Now, the product is not cheap. $400, I think, is the going price.
$299 to $399. We have a gold version and a stealth black, matte black version that we charge $399 for.
Got it. Now, when you get to this level of production, because you're selling, I understand, hundreds of thousands a year now. Am I ballpark correct?
Yeah.
These things only cost $25, $50 to make, so you've got a decent
I wish it were that low.
Really? Oh, okay. It doesn't look like there's much to it, so I thought at scale, but you have some decent cost of goods, enough that you don't charge a software subscription fee. Am I correct?
We don't charge a software subscription fee. That's correct.
So you bake into it. These things last. People wear them 3, 4, 5 years, you think?
We have a 2-year warranty, which I think every other wearable is basically a 1-year warranty, by the way.
Yeah. And then my Fitbit, I'm ready to just throw it away right now after a decade of using it, because they just break too often, and now they're charging for features. And I'm like, why am I paying a subscription and buying these off of you? It just, I don't know, maybe I'll get the Apple as well. But I wear both, and I like to have 2 different things. And I have the 8-sleep bed. And I'm an investor in 8-sleep, which is kind of nice because you get to get different, versions of your sleep from different apps and then compare them. And it's pretty miraculous how accurate it all is. Explain to us scientifically how the Oura Ring knows how I'm sleeping.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that we do that is, what's the ground truth? What's the reference data for sleep? Something called a polysomnography, right, device. And so, if you were to go in a sleep lab at Berkeley or Stanford, right, or UCSF, they'd strap you up to something that you'd have to wear in your head that typically has 16 wires coming off of it to your brain. And so what they're measuring is actually, when you go to bed in that sleep lab, is they're looking at brain waves and the frequency or the speed of the brain waves, right? And so they also look at heart rate variability, respiratory rate. And so what we do is, we have people in polysomnography labs, right? Just like you would, and we've done work at UCSF and other places, right? And you then actually have them wear the Oura Ring, and we look at all the raw data coming off of it. And then you start to train an algorithm, right? And, the more data you collect, I think the better you can get. If you use machine learning techniques, you can get pretty darn close. So is
it my temperature of my body combined with my heart rate? Do you know my breathing through the ring?
Yes. Yeah.
How do you know my breathing through a ring? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Or even like we've heard this before, like, how do you know my brain waves? Well, so breathing rate actually in the pulse waveform, just like an EKG, right? Pulse waveform looks pretty similar. You can actually see when you breathe in, right? Your chest compresses a bit, the heartbeat's a little bit, quicker, and even the amplitude of that pulse waveform can be higher. And so you can actually see breathing rate pretty well. I think we published some stuff in our blog that probably within 93% accuracy, assuming you have no medical conditions. Those people a little bit harder. So we look at the breathing rate, we look at the heart rate variability, we look at the movement because we have an accelerometer and gyroscope in here. We look at the temperature sensors, as you mentioned, and then we look at that raw pulse waveform data. And you train all that data against the polysomnography data and the results. And I think most people probably don't know this, but polysomnography, if I took your data from that UCSF lab and showed it to a sleep score at Stanford and a sleep score at Berkeley, they disagree on probably 20% of the data. Well, were you in REM sleep or were you really getting a light or deep sleep, right? So the standard error on the gold standard is about 20%. I think wearables, right now are probably 10% worse than that gold standard. But I think
24%, 22% variability or something.
Yeah, probably like 20. Yeah. Well, if the gold standard.
Why does it even matter? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't need to be perfectly accurate. It needs to be directionally accurate.
Correct.
So I know if I'm having a bad day, compared to my good days.
That's right.
Were you able to tell if people were having COVID or close to COVID? Because there was a connected thermometer that every time you take a temperature, it sends it to, I think, the CDC. And there was this concept of the CDC, if they just gave these out for free or severely discounted them, made them $1 to buy them at schools or pharmacies, and all that data was collected, we actually could know where outbreaks were happening for COVID or future COVIDs. If everybody's data on temperature was known, what would that do to the world vis-a-vis pandemics, colds, and just general health?
I think it's huge. I think it's the future, right? I think you'd be able to see an outbreak happening, way sooner, be able to have, city by city, neighborhood by neighborhood type, lockdowns to be able to quarantine and, frankly, stop the spread a lot faster for the people that had higher risk in those areas.
So tracking and tracing would be built in. You wouldn't need to add any software or anything. You just know people's temperature and sleep patterns, and it would be like, this is the sleep pattern and temperature and breathing of somebody with a COVID-like disease. Yeah,
we actually did a study on this. So we were the first wearable to announce a study with an academic institution during the pandemic in mid-March. We partnered with the UCSF, and so we launched a study called Temp Predict in the app. And so we had over 70,000 Oura Ring users join. UCSF actually published the results, the first early results of that back in December. And what they showed was basically using the minute-by-minute. So we see minute-by-minute temperature data, and we have 3 temperature sensors in there. And by the way, Apple Watches, Fitbits, Garmin's don't have those temperature sensors in there. So we were able to look at temperature, respiratory rate, heart rate variability, and sleep patterns, as you're mentioning, to see if people are getting sick. And what that study showed was basically, for 76% of participants in the first early results, and we still have more coming out soon, that we could see a significant change in data 3 days before they felt symptoms, which is just incredible. So, you could stop the spread, you could quarantine, you could
quarantine 3 days before you have symptoms. And you think about it, for most people, if we have another outbreak like this in another country, the cost of a pandemic is going to be, this pandemic's going to be, I guess, $5 to $10 trillion in
a lot
printed money, and who knows about lost work and the impact of schools or whatever. We're talking trillions of dollars in just one country. You could literally send everybody in the country an Oura Ring at scale, for $50 billion or something. It wouldn't be that expensive, and relative to the actual cost of the damage and the incalculable. Well, I guess it's calculable. People don't like to admit that, but the tragedy of human death. And man, if the ring just told you, like, your ring turns red, you might have COVID. Like, let's narrow your circle, or it just sends an alert. My God, that would have been great. How frustrating was it for you as somebody in this field to watch our pandemic response and how ineffective it was? And what do you think was most ineffective, which is another way of saying, if we put you in charge, what would you have done?
Well, I think Oura rings. So look, I think for us, it was tragic, right? I think unfortunately, way too many people lost lives, way too many people lost their jobs, and way too many people were infected. But I think this shows the power of technology like this in the future. I think for us, while it was frustrating, at the same time we sort of looked at it as like, hey, last time we had a pandemic like this, the Spanish flu, none of this tech was around. You couldn't collect the type of data. So I think from a data scientist perspective, you're looking at like, how do I train these algorithms? Now is a once in a lifetime opportunity so we can then prevent the next, pandemic. And I think that's what we were focused on. And luckily, I think that research, from UCSF was so great. The DoD and MTech, actually funded, over $5 million of it. MIT Lincoln Lab has been involved in the funding, so I think, some really good thought leaders in the space stepped forward and did that. And luckily, we were able then to, frankly, take that early research and findings, create an algorithm, which we actually spun up into an enterprise application, and we call it health risk management. We were able to deploy it in tens of thousands, maybe more, tens of thousands of people. And, even places like the NBA, we announced a partnership with the NBA.
All the NBAs have Oura rings. I saw that in the bubble.
Yeah, WNBA as well.
What was that able to do for them? They just knew people's temperatures?
No, well, I mean, look, I think with all these tests, even if people are getting tested every day like they were in both the NBA, WNBA, and some of these other sports leagues, right? There's false positives, there's false negatives. And again, you could see from this data if you're getting sick even before you feel symptoms. So I think it gave people a sense of security. If there's false positives, false negatives, you have another set of data to look at, which is super helpful. And frankly, like most organizations can't afford to test every day. You couldn't even get tests in the beginning, right?
It was ridiculous. I mean, that was, I think, for me, one of the biggest tragedies is I had friends who were getting tests from Taiwan, Hong Kong, Finland, other countries, and had at-home testing kits that cost $20 each that were probably marked up triple because they were being brought in here. And our FDA, for some reason, the FDA in the United States or whatever forces did not allow mass testing at home to occur because it wasn't perfect. And it's like, it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be directionally correct so that if you do have a positive, you go get the more perfect test. Yeah. It's just ridiculous how poorly.
And look, I think it is a hard science, right? Flus adapt. We're seeing variations right now. I think even the latest Indian, version that's going through there, some of the mutations there, looks like, not the vaccines aren't having as high effectiveness as they would with some other strains. And that's how these flus evolve, right? They keep evolving. And so for us, as frustrating obviously as it is, we just thought about how can we help. And so I think being able to be, forward there, working with, honestly, frontline healthcare workers was the first group that 10 Predict study. We, actually donated 2,000 rings and had a sponsor come in to donate another 1,000 rings to frontline healthcare workers, that are out there in the hospitals across the U.S. to be able to do the study to then deploy a product and serve different organizations. But, so we talked, the NBA gets a lot of publicity. What didn't was Las Vegas Sands. So we announced, casino workers going back to work, right? They don't want to be laid off, so the Sands group was like, hey, we got to help reopen Vegas, because otherwise we're going to have zero revenue and lay people off. And so, but they couldn't afford to test every day, right? Every single person. And so, using our data, they were able to prioritize testing to the right folks. Or if someone looked like they were getting sick, hey, maybe you shouldn't come in today. We actually made it so you could customize a notification as an admin, and you just saw aggregate data. So we got through all the privacy stuff, created some really cool frameworks to do that. And so now we're seeing interest from a lot of corporations as they go back to the office. There's going to be variants. Every flu season, frankly.
Do you see a time where a company could deploy these and say, "Hey, listen, you're coming in as a doctor, you're coming in as a card dealer, blackjack dealer. We need you to have a score on your Oura ring of readiness of 70 or better, or 80 or better, or your average has to be 80 or better." Now, I know this seems Orwellian, but for a bus driver or a pilot, we already give them requirements of sleep. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. We give them requirements for how often they can fly. I would love to know that my pilot on the plane I'm putting my family on has an Orwellian approach to this, if I may, that they have to wear an Oura ring and we need to know they're ready to fly. This must have come up inside your organization. What is the discussion like inside your organization and with other organizations about the line between personal privacy and, being ready to do good work? Like, I don't think office workers need to, obviously it would be great, but it would also feel Orwellian. But for a pilot or a brain surgeon or any kind of surgeon, this does not feel Orwellian.
Yeah.
For them to be wearing one. What are the conversations been like for you guys internally about doing something like this? Because obviously you've talked about it.
Oh, yeah. Look, we formed a whole ethics committee, a process, a framework. Frankly, we even joined the World Economic Forum has a panel that they put together on IoT and creating trustworthiness in IoT devices, because how you share this data. So a couple things we did. Everything has to be 100% opt-in. We never want to have anyone forced. Frankly, even in that pilot situation, I just think we're not there yet to take a stance on that. I think our big view is educate.
I can tell you the passengers are.
No, I know. But
Yeah.
At the same time, I think rather than force people, I'd rather see them educate and understand. If that pilot understood, or frankly, your Uber driver, hey, 6 hours or 4 hours of sleep, right? Your
It's dangerous.
rate, it's dangerous, right? Your chance of getting in an accident goes up,
Bus
20,
driver,
30, 40%.
train conductor,
truck driver, right?
Truck driver. Oh my Lord, no brainer.
Yeah,
And those are places where let's be honest, they're under pressure to do more. These, from what I understand, the Amazon drivers, there was a lot of controversy. Who knows how much of this is true in the fake news, but there was some controversy that maybe the freelancers were going a little too hard, trying to deliver packages a little too aggressively to hit windows and cause accidents. And I don't know if it's true or not, but so opt-in is one.
Opt-in is one.
And then what are the others?
So de-identified, figure out frameworks to share this data on a population level and empower the end user. So for example, our health risk management, you as the admin, I can't see that Jason's getting sick today. What I can see is, hey, of my group of 10 that's coming in the office, someone looks like they're getting sick today. What do you see, Jason? We want to empower you. You get a message in the app. Hey,
got it.
Go see Nick before you come in today. Give Nick a call. You can actually customize that message.
So it would be the same thing with if I had an employee who was suffering from mental illness, they go see the HR department. I don't know what mental illness they have. I don't know why they went to see the HR department, but I do know they're taking a leave of absence for 2 weeks. It could be their mom died and they're grieving. It could be they're having panic attacks. It's not my job as the manager to know what the ailment is.
Correct.
It's just to know that they're getting help so they can get back in the game.
Correct. Yeah. So I think we were like de-identified, create frameworks and ways to empower the individual, notify them first. Our team, I honestly credit off to our team through thinking all this stuff, even putting an ethics framework together. I think anytime we looked at where you can potentially, if we even have put in our contracts, we're like, if this data is used and then someone is terminated because of the result of the data, right? Like, we have the right to cancel a contract because, we don't want people, if you think about it, that's how you create Big Brother. Now,
yes,
I'm not saying, eventually we're figuring this out as a company. We don't have all the answers, but we've talked to lots and lots of these different types of frameworks and different types of companies. And, we're learning as we go.
How are those companies, if you de-anonymized a company that was in, the business of, one person's responsible for a lot of people's safety, like if the Ring let you know the person was on meth and on a bender every night or, out drinking every night and just disregarded sleep, you kind of actually would want to reprimand or fire that person. So it's nice honestly, that you want to take this stand, but
no, we've found more buy-in from companies because they don't want to get in trouble looking at this data either, right?
So there's a concern about that.
Exactly. So I think companies actually want de-identified and cool tools and frameworks like we've created to still empower the individual, right? They don't want to know what's happening to that person, nor should they, right? What they do want to know is, hey, empower that person to get help and get help faster. Right? That's what they want to be able to do.
So you would be okay theoretically. I love that you're willing to talk about this because it's just such a great
I don't know
topic.
if I said I'm willing. You just started asking me.
All right. Well, anyway, we can make this hypothetical, right? So in the hypothetical example, just thinking out the morality question here, if a person was struggling with alcoholism, was not sleeping, and they were responsible for other people's health, and their Apple Watch, Fitbit, or other device, let's just say a device, not your device, would know that. You wouldn't want them to be fired. You would want them to get a notification. I like this framework. They got a notification. Hey, you don't have enough restfulness and sleep to do your job properly. Please report to the HR department tomorrow.
Yeah.
And the HR department would tell them, we just need to check in on somebody's suitability for being on the job. They're not going to make their shift today or tomorrow. And then there's an intervention where they just discuss it like, hey, listen, is the ring broken? Let's give you a new one. Or is the watch broken? We can give you a new one. Or is there anything we should know? Do you need a 2-week leave of absence to kind of tighten this up? There is a way to do it that's compassionate, that doesn't embarrass the person, that doesn't make them lose their job, but that does let them know your job is pretty serious. If you want to be at the yoke of that plane or that controller of that train, you cannot get this level of sleep. We need to get a sleep level that's commensurate with the risk of, doing the job poorly.
I think that's exactly how and our team has come up with ideas of thinking about it and frameworks. You want to empower the individual. What you want to do is teach that person that like, hey, getting 4 hours of sleep 5 nights in a row means like you're at a really heightened risk for an accident. By the way, that's not just bad for the passengers. It's probably bad for you and your family.
Yeah, because you're at the front of the train.
Yeah. So
conductor and the pilot die first. Most of the time.
Most of the time, right? So
they generally go down with the ship. Let me ask you another tough question since we're at the end, and I always ask the hardest ones then when I got the guests warmed up, and you're so good. You're so honest. I got an honest guest here. Apple is particularly sharp-elbowed, should I say, with people who compete with them. They do it with a smile on their face, but the bane of my existence is that Fitbit and my health product, Apple Health Kit or Apple Health, and Fitbit don't play nicely. I bought a third-party tool. I spent $10 on it to try to get these things to sync. It always breaks it. It doesn't work. Yours seems to work pretty good with Apple, but you're not making a watch. Yeah, and I'm curious, is your relationship really good with Apple because you don't make a watch? And how do you think about your relationships with the Googles, and the Apples of the world, which have said, hey, we're going to own health. They both have said that. Fitbit's getting bought by Google, apparently.
Yeah.
And they want to own health. Apple wants to own health. How do you navigate that as a founder? I'm curious.
So, I think we play nicely with both of them. We distribute the apps on their app stores. We actually integrate with both, Apple Health and Google Fit. So I think we were like, let's be open and neutral. And in that sense, I think, we're partners, right?
Right.
I think because of our view first really on sleep and our focus there as a company, we found it complementary. Just like you are wearing a Fitbit and you have an Oura ring, we see that with so many Apple Watch wearers, right? And so I think for us...
What percentage of Oura wearers have a Apple Watch?
Don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head.
It's got to be, a third, half?
Probably, I'd assume a third. Yeah, maybe 20%.
I would think so because, when you're elite enough and well-heeled enough to afford a watch that's $800 or $600, you're going to be able to afford the Oura for 2 or 3 or 3 or 4. And they are complementary. They don't compete with each other. Which leads me to the next question. Which is better overall, to wear a watch or to wear a ring, and why? Is there some difference between what's being collected, or are they both just really great ways to record? Is your ring finger better than your wrist? Or
So the pulse signal from your finger is about 100 times, 2 orders of magnitude stronger than the wrist.
Really? I assume the opposite. That's so interesting.
Well, every hospital, where do they measure your heart rate and your SpO2?
Yeah, they do it on the tip of your finger.
Yeah. So it turns out, how you can feel these arteries on the inside of your wrist? Right? It's a lot of blood there. You can feel that pulse. You can't feel your pulse on the backside of your watch. Those arteries go to the palm of your hand. What's interesting there, your skin is super thin. Those arteries are close to the surface. That pulse signal then is 100 times stronger as a result. So that's something I actually worked on in college, got to mess around with some optics, right? And wearables. And so that's why I think for us, that's so important. So when you start training this data, I'll give you an example. Right now we record, we've said this before on podcasts, we actually sample at 250 hertz. That's 250 times we're firing our LEDs per second, right? To get the shape of that pulse waveform. We do that 8 hours a night, right? For about 6 nights, right? If you took the Apple Watch and you put it at 250 hertz or a Fitbit or anything, it would die in about an hour, because the pulse signal is so much weaker, right? And so the battery life would go kaput. And so as a result, we're able to capture higher fidelity data. I think there's a reason why our COVID data stood out amongst so many. Why both the NBA, the WNBA, UFC, NASCAR, Red Bull Racing, Las Vegas Sands, have chosen to use our product and our algorithm there. I think you'll see some new stuff coming on the road for us from actually on just sleep staging itself, updating our algorithm to even more accurate, the best that's out there in the field. And I think, we're going to show that with this high fidelity data, we can create algorithms that are just a cut above the rest. And so, while we started on sleep, and we think it's perhaps the most single important thing and how you start every day. We all arise from sleep every day. Your day starts out of sleep. I think there's a lot more we're going to be doing in total health as we get into the future.
The Ring right now is not super bulky, but it's not super thin. I have to take it off as an example when I type because I'm a fast touch typist. Do you see the Ring getting thinner or staying the same and including more objects? And then have you thought about any kind of embeddable technology? And if not, when do you think embeddable technology will happen? I'm not talking about, a neural link in your brain, but it does seem to me that if this works this well, why can't I put something into the palm of my hand, have it surgically implemented and, have a long life battery that, gives me even more data?
Yeah. So I think on the latter, that's an expensive procedure, more expensive than you think. Even if you go today to get a loop recorder, right, which a bedside can do, you don't need to go under to do that. And they implant a little chip and right underneath the skin, on top of where you're underneath the skin on top of your heart. That's like a $4,000 or $5,000 cost.
Really?
Yeah. If you look at, I think the Medicare reimbursement codes for that, it's been a while.
How different is that heart rate to everything else in the market, like watches and rings and everything?
I mean, what
much
we've
more
shown.
accurate.
Yeah, I mean, what we showed though is actually our heart rate and our heart rate variability overnight for every single heartbeat. We're 0.6% correlated with an EKG overnight. So we're getting pretty damn close.
So there goes. It's sort of like cameras. I remember talking to Sergey Brin about cameras 10 years ago, and he was carrying a digital SLR, and he asked me like, "What do you think a phone camera is going to be able to do, or digital SLR will be able to do with that phone camera?" And I was like, "Well, I don't think about this and this," and he was like, "Nothing. The software and the algorithms are going to make cameras in phones as good as, and they're going to get rid of digital SLRs. Only people with digital SLRs are going to, and he's right. I mean, you can do all these cool, every year we get like a couple of more low light, the blur effect behind you, all that stuff just gets better and better. So I guess that's what it is, right? The algorithms of the software make up for the lack of fidelity of the sensor.
Yeah, I think think about it this way, on any given week at Oura, we see more data on sleep. Just take 500,000 users. I'm just throwing a number out there because we, publicly said we've sold 500,000 rings now times 7 nights. That's 300. That's a lot of nights, right? 3.5 million nights, right? So that's more than all the sleep labs in America combined in a given week in one single place, right? So that fidelity, that data that you're starting to get as you start to aggregate more and more is super helpful, and those insights then can be obviously really, really rich. So I think data is the new currency, right? And so I think there's a lot there you can do, and you can keep training and seeing, patterns in that data. So yeah, I think, I want to get back though to one of your other questions. So, do we think it can get thinner? Yes. And smaller? Yes. And, I think also we've seen some people want bigger designs, more fashion looking designs. So I think you'll see us flex our muscles a bit there in both directions.
Here comes the SKU craziness. This is that Steve Jobs would be absolutely losing his mind over the number of Apple Watch SKUs. It was like, oh my God, we got how many sizes, how many styles, how many crowns. It just got so crazy. But I guess in this world, you are a fashion accessory and this. Do you have any brand partnerships with, a Gucci or a Prada or some Tiffany or something? And have people approached you about that yet or no?
We've seen interest from all of them.
Really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So I think, how we do that, how you figure that out as a brand, right? Apple went and partnered. Who was it with? Hermes?
Yeah, for the wristband. Or
Fitbit, I think at one point did a partnership with like Tory Burch, if I'm not, I can't even remember.
That's for like the handles, but a really cool ring that I got the one with the flat top. I don't know what that's called?
Heritage. Yeah.
Heritage. For some reason, I thought it looked cooler than just round.
Yeah.
I like the flat top.
I like the Heritage too. That's our most popular version.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I wonder if people are going to use these as wedding rings, right?
We've already seen it. We've already found.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In fact, we get a lot of angry wives because they're like, my husband won't wear his wedding ring, but now he's wearing an Oura ring. Like,
oh boy, yeah, you're in trouble now. Just wear it on your wedding ring. It's the same thing. I mean, and can you get them engraved? I didn't notice.
We haven't done any engravings yet. I think
that's an interesting one too.
Yeah, that could be pretty cool. The options are endless, but to your point, Steve Jobs had a point. You don't want too many SKU bloat, right? So I think there's always those trade-offs you got to figure out as a company.
It definitely is a trade-off. The engraving thing, I wonder how you every time you check out at Apple, they're like, when it's engraved, and I'm always like, not as much as I want the product here in 2 days. So I
haven't pulled the trigger. What is it? It's like $50 or $100 even on the AirPods to get them.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I have a Sharpie. I'll put my initials on it. Thanks.
Label maker.
Yeah, and then if I give it to somebody, do I want it to say at Jason on it? I'm not so sure about that. Hey, listen, continued success. Thanks for coming on the program. I know it's been hard and a struggle, and it's just great to see that you got to the other side. Any advice for hardware founders on, as we wrap here, what the secrets are to running one of these companies, or is it just raise a shit ton of money?
No, I think we were
the best.
Opposite. I'd actually say the opposite. We started really small. Our seed was $2 million. Our A we did in a couple tranches, about $5-6 million each. And I think test and prove, right? Test and iterate. Make sure you got product market fit. And when you have that, then I think you feel more confident to raise more capital. I think some of the hardware companies that went under, a lot of it was they raised too much too fast, right? Like Jawbone raised a ton, right? I forget what they raised, like $1 billion.
I love my Jawbone products, yeah.
Same. I had the Jambox, I think there was some cool stuff they made.
I mean, they were so early to so much.
Yeah.
I love Hassan, yeah.
I think even, I don't know everything that happened, obviously, at any of these companies, but, some of them, I think, Juicero raised a lot of money at one point.
Sure.
I don't think it was completely bad. There's clearly people who love the product, but, I think there's a lot of examples of hardware. I think you raise too much too fast. Your investor expectations are too high. So I think I'd actually say, just like software, be iterative. The unfortunate part about hardware is it takes more time. Right? Yeah. You got to get the product, you got to qualify it, you got to test all the components, you got to ship it, then you got to test the damn thing, then you got to load firmware, middleware on it. So, it is like running 3-4 organizations in one. So be patient. But look, I think we're seeing it come back, right? Peloton, I think, really helped. You saw it now with Mirror and Tempo, a bunch of these other companies.
Tonal is incredible. Tonal,
yeah.
I just ordered the Hydro. So I have
the rowing machine.
I have the Peloton Tread, which just got recalled. I think that was a little... all treadmills have sadly killed children and pets. I don't think this was unique to them. I think they're just being super, super cautious, but I'm not sure any child or dog should be anywhere near a treadmill. This is like super dangerous.
Yeah.
So I actually think that they may have overreacted on their recall. And I don't know, because I don't think I'm not recalling mine. I don't know what they're going to do to make it safer. Like put a bumper on the back or something? I haven't gotten any clarity.
Spent that much time looking at it. So I thought there was an issue with like the screen dislodging on some of them.
The issue was, and there's tragic videos online, kids will play with the treadmill. So what does the kid do? They put their hands on the back of the treadmill. Then they get sucked under the treadmill. The thing moves so fast. One kid's playing with the speed, which is what I would do. And then my little brother, which is what he would do, would be trying to grab the back of it or whatever, and they get sucked under it, and then the wheel is burning them. So there's been a lot of gnarly things that happen with treadmills. My rule is I unplug the safety key and put it in another location, and I unplug it. And what they really need is a pin key. Just put a pin key on this, and the issue's over. Then a kid would have to have the safety key, the pin key, the power. I mean, it would be 3 steps. Tech companies get held to such a higher standard. You deal with a lot of people ripping off the idea and like doing bogus versions on Amazon. I noticed when I searched one time, there were like lots of rip-off products. So those...
Yeah, we've seen that, but most of us have, come and gone. I think, really at least, volume-wise, size-wise, or even capital now at this point after we've scaled, been scaling. I think, haven't seen that too much. Earlier on, we definitely did, but...
I know you guys have had multiple offers to sell the company, and I'm sure SPAC. How do you think about that? Is a SPAC interesting for a company at your scale now?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely get inbounds on it. I think for us, it's how do we figure out the right capital structure to deliver the most value for customers? And I think, SPACs can add a lot of pressure. Being public can add a lot. So after a year of banking, I spent 9 years at a hedge fund, by the way, before coming to Oura. And so seeing that world, I think there's a time that's appropriate for it. I do like the rigor the financial markets give you. And, I think, there's something about a company that operates well as, when all eyes are on it. But I think, we're still pretty early in our story. So I think, we've got a lot to iterate on, a lot more to prove and deliver more value to customers. And I think if we do that, then the appropriate, stay private next round, go public, people want to buy you. I think, all that's open. I will say the M&A side, if you look at it, just in the last year, you saw Google close on Fitbit, Amazon launch a wearable, and pretty significant rumors that Facebook's trying to launch one too. Yeah. So if you look at this space, I think you sort of have Apple at like 50 million Apple Watches in 2020, and then Fitbit, at like 10 to 12 million units behind as the number 2-ish, right? And so I think if you're everyone else in the space, you're like Google, Amazon, you're like, holy cow, this Apple Watch trend has continued. This is important. Health is a, $10 trillion, $20 trillion problem globally. We're losing this battle and we need to catch up. So I definitely think you're seeing, people realize consumers want more of this, especially after the pandemic. Wearables numbers globally, accelerated, and consumer demand's accelerating, and the use cases are expanding. So as you go from, call it step tracking, wearables 1.0, to I think really understanding health, wearables 2.0, I think we're in a really good spot, and I think that's what consumers want, and that's what we're trying to focus on as a company.
I could tell you, ain't nobody wearing a Facebook wearable. Do not sell your company to Zuckerberg. Or if you're going to, please first talk to Kevin Systrom, then talk to the WhatsApp founders, because they hate Zuck after what he did to their products. And,
good to know.
I mean, also think about his, they launched their own video camera system, their own version of a Zoom hardware device. And people were like, yeah, we already don't trust you with our privacy. Hell no, are we giving you our health data or putting a camera in your house? And people said the Facebook portal is an incredible device. I was like, you have to be a maniac to put your kids on Instagram for kids, let Zuck have a camera in your house, or give him. I mean, I think that's why he didn't win Fitbit. Is I don't think he didn't pay the right price.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think you're right, because there was some language in the merger docs there that pretty much suggested that there was another buyer. I think rumors came out that it was Facebook.
Yeah, it was 100% Facebook. Yeah, and I mean, it's really, you think that's going to pass scrutiny after you've screwed up the election and, can't keep hate speech or whatever, off your platform, and you're throwing your hands up about the president? We're going to give you all this health data. Probably not a good steward of data already. And health data is a whole different level. And just from this conversation, I feel great that you're actually the one who's anonymizing and keeping our data safe over at Oura. You've been a great guest, really honest. Appreciate the time. I know you're hiring right now. So yes. Where can people go to find out what jobs?
Well, I think just LinkedIn, but
go to LinkedIn
and OuraRing.com, OuraRang.com as well.
Yeah, LinkedIn is just the best place to go. You get the great screening system there, and they target all the candidates. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn's job portal. All right, listen, continued success. It makes a great corporate gift. So if you're doing corporate gifting in the fall. That's how I got mine. And I'm telling you, I give chocolates every year. I'm thinking maybe for the big sponsors of this podcast, I'll start giving some Oura rings. Because when I got it, I was like, that's pretty sick. To give somebody a $300 or $400 ring for Christmas. I mean, listen, I know I'm important to a couple of the sponsors, but
yeah,
I was blown away. And trust me, I remember the name of the company. I wouldn't say it here. I don't want to, without their permission, say they sent me this, but it was just a very touching gift. And it was like, aw, and it was just, it's so nice because when you send it as a gift, you actually send the sizing kit. So it even feels personalized. They only, I'm assuming they only pay if they actually buy it.
Yeah.
Right? So if the person doesn't actually follow through, they don't follow through. All right, listen, continued success and congratulations. Sounds like a great place to work.
Yeah.
And we'll see you all next time on This Week in Startups.